Hello there, and welcome to my video. In this video, I'm going to look at a type of brush that I really like for drawing, and it is a flat chiseled brush with a rotational dynamic to it. On the Wacom tablet with Photoshop, there is a rotation dynamic that you can set for a specific stylus, Wacom stylus, and it's called a 6D art brush. And in this brush, you as you rotate the barrel, the brush shape rotates along with it. So on the iPad Pro, I guess any iPad nowadays, with an Apple Pencil, there is not that rotational dynamic with their pen stylus, although there is a tilt azimuth, azimuth meaning the angle or the direction angle that the tilt of the pen is at. So if you rotate the barrel, the brush shape doesn't rotate, but if you tilt it to a certain way, the shape rotation aligns with the azimuth of the pen. So for instance, I have a brush that has a fairly extreme rotation element to it. You can see here the shape is very flat, and it's kind of a textured element to it. You can see by the dots. I made this up myself actually. So you get kind of a streaky effect with it, as well as a textured grain. So it assimilates a dry brush, ink dry brush in some ways, or a heavy black pencil, or a combination of a pencil and ink quill pen. So what this does, so I have the rotation, the flatness being horizontal. You can see here it's horizontal, but you can change the angle of it by using two fingers and just rotating the shape icon there. So what this means, if you go into the shape menu of the brush tools options, you can see there's a azimuth setting, and make sure you have that turned on. I mean, you can download the brushes in the link provided below, but if you're creating your own brush, make sure that turns on. And what that does, I'll show you here. As you can see, this is a flat shape here. What this does is, like, if you look at the inset video, basically when the brush or the stylus is this way, the angle of the shape is this way, so it follows the shape as you draw. I'll do a demonstration here. I've got black ink. I'll make the size of the brush very large so you can see it. Sometimes there is actually a as you're drawing, there's a depending on what color the screen is, you're going to see the shape of the brush in a sort of an outline form, but it's very hard to see when it's small, and also against the white background. So you can see if I go side to side when I'm holding it this way, you can see it's fairly flat, but as I drag it, it's very the angle of the stroke is not perpendicular, but in line with the pen barrel. You get a flat line. But if I go perpendicular to the barrel angle orientation, it's very flat. So how would you use this when you're drawing? Basically, depending on the way the pen is held, if I'm holding it this way, you get a very reduce the size of the brush size. I'll get a shape like this. If I hold it on an angle like this, it gets thinner, and if I hold it like this, it gets even thinner. And of course, if I'm doing a curve shape, if I start the stroke on a perpendicular on the perpendicular side of the azimuth, I don't know how to explain it best, and I do a curve, you can see that you get this nice brush feel to it, where it comes extremely thin and then goes thick and then thin again. So I'm gonna clear this here, and as you can see underneath here, I've got a blue line drawing of a hand. So I'll demonstrate the illustration using this brush. So I don't. It's not. If you're looking for a brush that's really black and precise and thick, then this is not the brush for you. You probably go to the inking section, use a studio pen or something like that, where the brush is very, very precise and very tight. I like this because it has qualities of inking as well as sketching, and it gives you a nice loose yet precise feel to it. And you can set it to for the using the opacity here to make it darker or lighter, but it has that option because there's a lot of texture, and also there's because the brush is built out of dots, it's a very streaky feel to it. So as you know, when you're drawing, you want when you're doing a line drawing, you want the thicker the shape that you're drawing, you want the side with that's away from the light. Say the light is coming from this side here, you want this line to be thicker and this to be thinner. I mean, that's a common way of gaining depth in drawing when you only have a line to deal with or to use instead of shading or whatever. So I'm gonna obviously this part of the hand is in shade, so this will be a thicker line. So I angle it so I'm dragging the pen. You just notice the way I'm holding the and then as I draw the top part of the hand, I do the stroke perpendicular to the azimuth of it. I mean, of course, you can use the eraser, and the great thing about Procreate is that the brushes are mirrored in the eraser part, so you can just use the same brush to actually erase out. Oops, should probably use a glove for this. So you can see that if I'm doing the stroke perpendicular, that the stroke is a lot thinner. And there's some aspects of this brush. There's the size dynamic and the Apple pressure in the Apple Pencil pressure section of the options. You can actually set it to I have it set at 70%, so that not only is it the angle, the azimuth of the pen, it's also the the pressure of the pencil, and also the pen tilt. So there's a slight, I have it at 48% Apple Pencil tilt. As you tilt it further down, the brush gets thicker, and if you want a little finer brush, you hold it more upright. So it gives you like literally three options, three dynamics working together. Now, as you may know, working digitally, that the larger the file size, the larger you zoom out, the more ink is deposited on each stroke. So sometimes I I even go to a streaky version of the same brush, which has even less mass to the brush, where you can see that it's very I'll use this here. There's a lot of streakiness in it, and what that does is you can see that it gives you even more variable variance in line, because it's actually the texture and the brush shape is actually working against the flow of the ink. And again, it gives you that gives you the option to build up the line rather than doing everything in one stroke. So now I want to take a moment to look at the stroke that's involved to get the right line that you want. So this type of line is I particularly like, just because it doesn't have that digital feel to it. I think the brushes that are included that doesn't have this the flat azimuth aspect of it. You could sort of, if you're an artist or a digital artist, you can sort of tell that it's a digital line, whereas this has more a natural feel to it, and it has more of a loose yet tight feel to it, and it doesn't feel overworked. That's one aspect I really liked about it. I've divided these into sketch lines and then shader lines, but I'll go through the sketch ones first. So as you can see, the angle of the flatness, shall I call it, is perpendicular to the barrel of the pen. So basically, as you turn your pen, whatever tilt azimuth it's at, the flatness follows it like this. So if you I'll put on the texture here. So if I do a stroke this way, perpendicular, if the stroke is perpendicular to the barrel, it's a very flat, sharp line. If I do a stroke, I have to increase the size of it here. So I increase the size quite a bit here, and it's still pretty flat. But if I pull it this way, basically the stroke is in line with the barrel. It's a very fat line. Now, unless you're drawing like a architectural drawing, most of the lines will be curves. So with this brush, I'll just delete that here. When you're doing a curve, you can't help but get a curved, a thick and thin variance in the line. I find just because of your elbow, the way you're doing a stroke, that when you're doing a stroke from the top right to the bottom left, or the bottom, I would say, you get the biggest size variance. You're going this way. It's a little harder to get, just because maybe because if you're right-handed, I guess you can very easily just flip the horizontal to get that variance as well. Delete that. What's in play here in this thick and thin line is not only the shape, the flat shape. It's also the size dynamic. So the harder you press, so to actually get more of a thick and thin, I would press harder at the middle part of the curve to get it to accentuate it even more. And also there's a pen tilt dynamic up in it, but not so much. It's about 48 or 50%. So if I had it, you know, use it as much, but as you tilt it more towards the table, it gets thicker, and as you hold it more upright, it gets a bit finer, but it's not as much in it. But all three factors, especially the first two, contribute to giving you this line. So if you're doing a straight line, let me show you the if you're doing a straight line, so let's say you're doing a freehand straight line, if you want a very thin line, without even changing the size, you just hold it perpendicular to the stroke. If you want it a little bit thicker, you hold it on sort of a 45-degree angle to the stroke, and you can see that it becomes thicker. And if you want a really thick line, you just pull it in line with the stroke, and you get a thicker line. Now also you can, you know, press harder and stuff like that, but I find with all three of them played, it really gives you a nice feel. Now another thing, as you can see, I have the same brush, but with different source, a shape source. I've got a round version, oval version, and of course I have that streaky version. The streaky version has less density in the middle of the shape, so there's some really holes in it, so you get more of a streaky effect. And then the flat one. So I find that when I'm doing very tight shapes, that I use an oval one, just because it there's not so much. You want more of an even line, and especially when you're going around curves, you don't want the line to fade out, so it has more density, no matter how what angle you're holding it at. And also when I'm doing the rough sketch, because I'm not paying attention to the, I'm just more paying attention to the, you know, the drawing shape and the form, rather than the line quality. So I find I use the oval one for that. I mean, it still has a bit of a shape, you know, dynamic, you know, what I call the azimuth variance on it, but not so much. So these three down here are what I call shader brushes. I'm gonna turn that off and turn back and I'll open up a new layer. To also use that dry brush analogy I used before, that when you're doing shading, you don't want so much of the size dynamic. So when you press, when you don't want the thick and thin variant as much as when you're doing the actual line. You want to do a more even, flat coverage. So basically this is the same brush, but with the size turned off. As you can see, that's at 0%. This is the streaky brush, and this really does give you the feel of a dry brush. So right here it's in line with the barrel. I'm going to turn it this way so that it's perpendicular. So I'm going to try to add a little more, you can see a little more shading to the bottom of the arm where the shade is. This is like a tendon here. Tend to put the opacity down so that you can build up the shading. It has a really nice feel to it, and it gives you it adds form to your drawing without adding the weight of a flat, you know, flat paint. I'm just going to erase out this one, is out of place. And it really accentuates the line more, because it's basically the same type of line and texture, but it you know, add a more even shading feel to it. So it feels like it's part of this line, but not really. And of course I've saved it out as non-streaky and then oval as well. So there you have it. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, enjoyed it, please subscribe and like it, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks.